ESPN, Max Preps, sites like Be Recruited. And unfortunately, with all of the data that exists out there for the numbers, quantitative, unfortunately there is still no platform that exists that allows an athlete to track or a coach to track their performance from start to finish for the entire lifeblood of their athletic career. And that's what we're seeking to change. So my biggest questions to many of the people, I'm sorry that I'm in the way. I need to work this out a little bit more. Where's my cursor at? Do I just click? There it is. I found it. Okay. But for us, what the pain is as coaches, as athletes, is the simple fact that when someone starts and they're tracking themselves, we don't have the ability to be able to have one continuous link for each individual that exists within the athletic realm. So this is where it all started for me. This right here, you see a picture of 7th grade boys basketball team. This is about 2 years in for me when I got started coaching. This guy right here that you see is someone I consider a mentor in the field of coaching, as well, like an older brother to me. His name's Robert Lewis, and he was the one that really got me started with something that ultimately has become a love of mine. I absolutely enjoy coaching. It's something that I fully intend to do until I'm no longer able. But with respect to my passion for coaching basketball, there were this particular team right here led me to seek out and answer some questions. And there's 3 of those. What did I need to work on? What's my overall track record? And as well, how can I stay connected with my friends and athletes who play and as well coach within sports. This right here is present day. I coach, as I mentioned, for Heritage Christian Academy. Coaches you see here, our head coach there, and as well another one of our assistant coaches. Last season, quite literally, was a huge breakthrough for Performa. Last season was pretty much where I discovered the solution and came to the conclusion that there was one underlying thread that connected everybody who competes within sports and athletics, and that's performance. And the biggest thing with that is that anyone, whether coach or athlete, regardless of the sport that they compete in, they perform, whether good or bad. And so there's an analogy that I love to give to people. Athletes and coaches are just like teachers and students. With respect to teachers and students, you have a teacher who he or she will teach a lesson plan, and the actual test to see whether or not you've learned anything is in written form, obviously. And then from that point, you get graded. And with the accumulation of all those tests, you get a grade report. Now, if I correlate that to athletes and coaches, what happens is as coaches, we essentially are teaching lesson plans every day in practice. Our test is the actual competition, whatever game, meet, or match it is that we compete in that week. What the difference is that unfortunately we do not track consistently, or at least give reporting out consistently to our athletes that allows them to understand and know better who they are, what they're doing, and how to improve. A big quote that we have highlighted on our site is, you cannot improve what you do not measure. And so that's the biggest premise of everything that we're doing here with Performa. So with Performa, athletes and coaches across the world will be able to connect, discover, and engage with the community that they're a part of. And really what it's intended to do is to provide one hub, if you will, for everyone that's a part of the community to be able to go and just basically build upon their careers. From the youngest that we're offering Performa to, which is as young as 8 years old, spanning all the way up to 18 right now currently within our development. So today we're here at phase 1 of Performa, and I'm going to show you guys a quick video. It's a little different for me because it's not on my laptop, but I need to pull this over. So this is the start of what we're doing with Performa. And where this all originates from happened literally last season. What I did with my basketball team was at the end of every game that we had, I had them fill out something called a performance assessment. And what that performance assessment was designed to do was to essentially help them to articulate in their own words how they feel they did. As a parent or anyone who is not in attendance at a specific game or a competition, and if you guys have any relatives that may be kids that actually compete in youth sports, I think one of the first fundamental questions that we may ask is, how did you do? So this demo right here takes you through what it is that we do. A user will simply log in at the end of every game or competition that they compete in. They'll hit take the assessment, and at that point, that's where they will start their brain dump, if you will. You can kind of correlate it to a digital diary to sort of help you to frame and keep track of not only what you're doing from game to game, but as well, this really helps to enable the user to be able to look at trends and tendencies and whatever inconsistencies that may be there within their own performance. So once they complete this performance assessment, which takes literally less than a minute if you're fast, 2 minutes if you're slow, it will simply show you your results, and what we do is we put that in report form. The way that we are controlling this is really specific to sort of our design within Performa and our data architecture. We wanted to make sure that we put something that was useful out there into the market and not just another platform or application to use by athletes and coaches that would really hold no value for them. So how have we evolved? Just to give you guys a little bit of summary and brief overview, Performa is an early stage startup, and what we do is we record performance for coaches and athletes for the lifetime of their participation in sports. Beginning at phase 1, which is where we are now, we're starting with a transferable athletic profile that really helps to track performance from a qualitative perspective, not the quantitative, meaning those numbers, those lists of numbers that we talked about earlier, but in doing it from the qualitative perspective, it helps the individual as well as whoever it is that may be coaching them to sort of pick up on what ways can that specific person improve, but as well as a team. From 2012 up to now, we started here as the compete agent. And what the compete agent was designed to do, we were starting out trying to be YouTube, if you will, for the athletic community. Fast forward, I sat down with myself and had a conversation with myself, and I asked myself, I said, well, would I use the Compete agent if it were in existence? And I had to answer that question truthfully and say no, because YouTube already exists. If there's a video that I'm interested in, I will go to YouTube, probably more so because of, number one, it's been around longer, brand recognition, and I can trust whatever information is, well, not everything, but for the majority of the part, I can trust them, what it is that I'd be searching on YouTube. From the Compete agent, we moved to calling ourselves Game Scout. What Game Scout was designed to do was to be able to track stats in real-time game format to be able to not only help the coach to assess where the team was within game time, but as well afterwards be able to shoot off numbers and list of numbers to the athletes. Again, I sat down, had a talk with myself, and I asked myself, was this something that was necessary? And the answer to that question was no. Reason being, there are a ton of companies out there that have stat applications. I did not feel the need to reinvent the wheel and to try and go and do something that someone else had already done. So from there, we pivoted on to TAP. TAP means Trace Your Athletic Performance. What we were seeking to be there was basically like a social security database for athletes and coaches, to be able to give them a continuous link from the time that they first started, however young they may have been, 6, 7, or 8 years old, to the time that they ended. Take myself, for example, and punch me out, another 30 years or so when I'm 60 or more. And I end up, coaching at some school in Australia. From TAP, we pivoted, renamed and rebranded to Performa. And Performa, hence the name, was where we started to focus on the performance assessment for individuals within their respective teams. It's been said that you don't have a business until you acquire your first customer. So what we're seeking to do is on the business end of things, we are looking to monetize, starting out for organizations meeting the team at $10 monthly, $36 annually. And the reason behind that is what we're doing, because sports differ in terms of their seasons. The minimum that you can have a sports season lasts for about 3 months. The maximum ranges up to about 5. If you're doing things all year round, as I do, I work with club teams and as well as school teams during the year. It's beneficial to do it for the entire year. And what that does is that helps you to connect to all of your athletes, and within our data structure, it helps for all the performance assessments and whatnot to be categorized. We believe that if you change your game, you can change the game. From ages 6 to 17, you guys can read just as well as I can, but there are about 21 million plus athletes that are involved in youth sports. As to how many teams that equates to, we don't know, because there are such a growing number of teams every day that become existent. There's no way to pinpoint exactly how many teams exist out there within the youth sports market. So, with that being said, I would love to hear you guys' feedback. Following questions: where do you see further potential here? How would you market this concept? Or how could you see marketing the concept? What problems do you foresee? And then as well, how can we continue to make this a better concept than what exists now?
Well, this might be kind of long. First off, I think the concept is really interesting and solid in that tracking the data for each of those players is really cool. And first I'll address just your presentation. You say a lot. Try to limit that. Like it's something we all have to go through, but it's distracting. And if I was an investor, that's all I would be thinking about. Second, you got to what your product or service was halfway through the presentation. had a very long intro, and I kind of got where we were going, but it wasn't halfway through where I was like, okay, this is what we had. Start with what it is, and then you can put some of that stuff in there. But make sure that they know right away what it is you're trying to do. As far as the tracking stuff goes, what I kind of was envisioning in my head, I don't know if you played any like NBA Live video games or anything. At the end of the game, you can go through and look at where the shots were made, what shots were hit, what shots were by who. Stuff like the endurance level of the player and when they start to get tired and stuff like that. In my head, instead of, first off, a high school student, am I really going to go online, give good feedback after a game about myself, about other players? Probably not. As a coach, you're better suited to do that kind of thing. And my thought would be, you film the game with 2 GoPro cameras at some kind of angle, watching it, and then you go back afterwards, plug in who made shots from where, whether they made it or not, how long they've been in, stuff like that, all the relevant data. And as a coach, first off, that's more valuable to you than anybody, because then you can go to each of those players and go, this is what's going on, this is what you need to work on. And they can go and look at those reports as well if they want, but at least as like a young sports team through high school sports team, it's probably more for coaches than it is for players themselves, at least from what I would kind of gather.
Just a heads up, guys, with that pitch being a little long, we've only got about 3 or 4 minutes of questions here, so we'll take a few and then the second pitch.
An issue you got to deal with is privacy.
Right.
I do not want my 5-year-old, you tracking data on my 5-year-old.
Right.
Okay, that's just not cool. I don't know how you're going to deal with that. But there's probably a good way to do that. So think about that. As far as your presentation, tighten it up. I don't care about the whole story. Don't tell me what you did before. Tell me about the product, the value. And an example of the report would be, the output would be great as well.
So I think part of the problem is, I think somebody else mentioned it, but branding at the beginning.
Right.
I'm halfway through your presentation, now I can't even tweet you because I don't know who you are. Okay, so that's really important. Clearly state the problem that you're trying to solve at the beginning. Also, do you have any intellectual property connections with this stuff? Because you've got a competitor, looks like, called Performa Sports. That has...
That's in another country, fully aware of them. We're putting legal things in place now to protect our IP.
Okay, terrific.
So I'm a dietitian, and right now the dietary guidelines are under high critique because of self-assessment. So when you're asking these kids to self-assess themselves, and then you give them a bar without a drop-down, they could say anything in that little box, and then it's going to be really hard for you to track any continuity with, because it's qualitative data. So they could be like, I was a badass, and it's like, well, what does that mean over time? If there was a drop-down for these qualitative, like some way to standardize the qualitative data, that might be more meaningful, but I just don't see how you can make an impact over time, and I didn't see that in the presentation, how your product is making an impact over time. That's my question.
I really like the idea of asking athletes, especially the ages that you were giving, to think about their performance this way, and I think that, I don't want to lose that in this. I guess to me, my impression from your presentation was more that it was about people self-reflecting. We all know that self-reflection can kind of be BS sometimes, but that's great. That's what needs, and I have an education background, and that's what creates improvement and learning a lot of the time. So I don't want you to lose that, from my perspective.
Thank you for that. I do want to point out, we're starting out, 1 minute, we're starting out with the quantitative side, but in the end, we are going to be adding into that the qualitative, meaning the actual statistics, the number side, and as well biometrics here in the future, because there's a lot of product products and applications out there that are tracking your actual body metrics as you're working out. So.
Crossover is the leader in this field right now, and for $800 a season for youth sports, you can have your team analyzed with ESPN analytics. So definitely check that out.
All right. Thanks,